So I think we have everyone on the panel. So I'm Cecilia Lee, Investment Director of OK Blockchain Capital and the investment arm of OK Group. And today I'm very honored to have those fantastic panelists together with me. We are going to talk about the integration of the blockchain technologies. So we have Ryan Chang, who is the co-founder and the marketing manager of SCRY.INFO. It's very confusing. I think I will let him to introduce this company later. And we have Zhen, which is my friend and the fantastic investor from JLAB. And we have Chris, is the researcher and instructor of British Columbia. And then finally, we have Ashley, who is the project lead of the Blockchain World Economic Forums. So to begin with, I think I want to ask you guys, I think I will let everyone to introduce a little bit about what they do and what is their group. Let's start from Ryan.
Okay, so I think maybe a little bit confusing of SCRY.INFO, right? It seems like some people will say it's scary info. It's not scary, it's SCRY. SCRY means in Western countries, we stand here and with a galaxy ball to predict the future, right? So SCRY.INFO, I think blockchain represents the future, and SCRY.INFO is also. So SCRY.INFO is a blockchain development company and focus on the I think there is a whole ecosystem of SCRY. One is our public chain, and in the upper layer, there's an application layer. We have developed a decentralized wallet, and also it's like the apps called SCRY City, and people can trade and buy land and start their transaction inside. And also we have another data platform called SCRY Depot, and people can trade their real data in it. And when the other people deploy a certain amount of data from the data provider, they can get the bonus as rewarded. So my position in SCRY.INFO is marketing. So nice to see you guys.
Hi, this is Zhen. So I'm the partner with JLAB, and thanks for SV Insight to put this together. So for JLAB, it's the crypto fund for JD Capital, which is one of the largest private equity fund in China, and it's the only public traded fund in China as well on Shanghai Stock Exchange. So we have a lot of portfolios in traditional, like medical and real estate and just all the vertical, and we also pour a lot of energy into peer-to-peer lending and a lot of financial products. And we not only function as a fund, but also have security exchange, have more operational stuff, and we have the license of banking and all the financial services. So on the JLAB, we invested a lot of, basically we have public chains like Ontology, Thunder, Oasis. We also support a lot of, on the equity side, the second largest wallet in China, Kcash, and the largest ticker in China, MyToken. And we also on the adoption side, we invest in Cocos, which is one of the largest game engine in China. And then there's a lot of worldwide developers actually developing on top of it. And yeah, so on me, I come from traditional venture capital background, invest a lot of game companies back then, like computer vision, AI, and VR, AR stuff. Yeah, so very glad to be here with you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Rowell. I'm from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, so visiting from there. I do a couple of things. So one, I do research and teaching in the blockchain space. So as far as research goes, I help set up research projects with organizations and industry partners to tackle blockchain-related issues, linking them up to researchers at my uni. I also research how existing organizations will be threatened by more distributed solutions, so helping executives kind of understand the threats to their industry. And then on the other side, I do teaching, so I teach an executive education course in the same kind of thing, helping managers figure out, looking at their industry from a sort of a blockchain-oriented lens or a distributed lens, to kind of identify threats and opportunities there. And I also teach blockchain-specific lectures within existing courses. So a couple of weeks ago I did a guest lecture in an introductory accounting course. So what does blockchain mean for accounting, things like that. MBA courses, things like that as well. So, yeah.
Super cool. Hi, my name is Ashley Lannquist. I work at the World Economic Forum. We have a 4-person blockchain team there. I'm joined by my colleague over here as well. Before World Economic Forum, I was doing business school at Berkeley, at UC Berkeley, and part of blockchain at Berkeley, which is the largest university-based blockchain organization in the world. So I was learning a lot about blockchain during my 2 years in the MBA program. I also co-founded a Women in Blockchain conference, an organization called She256 while I was at Berkeley, and a mobility consortium called MOBI, or Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, which has most of the world's automakers in it to innovate blockchain. So it's a successful industry consortium example. At the World Economic Forum now, I manage 2 projects. One is helping central banks to research blockchain and to disseminate their research learnings that they have related to blockchain, which they've actually been looking at for several years. And the other is working with a Latin American government to develop a digital blockchain-based, smart contract-based procurement system to see if we can use the transparency features and the censorship resistance features of DLT to reduce corruption in a public procurement setting as an experiment.
So, okay, and I think we're talking the integrations. So what do you think are the pain points? I mean, what are the technical and business challenges do you think in this area to block the integration and adoption of the blockchain technologies? I think, Chris, your study and done lots of research. So can you share some of your insights?
Okay, I'm predominantly a sociologist by training, so I don't know how much I can speak to the technical pain points. Hopefully let some other people do that. But yeah. I can talk about maybe a couple of things. So the motivation for setting up my executive education course was that often I talk to people in business and they say, yeah, blockchain's great, we can just put a blockchain into what we already do and kind of make our existing processes more efficient or cheaper or whatever. But they're not really kind of fully comprehending the totality of like what blockchain's capable of doing. If they do that, their business might not exist, or certain aspects of the business might not exist in 10 or 15 years. So trying to get people's head around what this is really capable of, thinking through more distributed lenses, I think that's one of the barriers that I see at the moment. And another barrier from the other side, so perhaps from the consumer side, I think we're only just beginning to, we talk about how blockchain empowers people to own their own data and have management over their assets, their digital assets. I think we're just getting to the stage where people are starting to figure out what data is and how it's collected and that it's valuable for somebody. And then I think we still need to get to the stage where we start caring about it and looking for different types of solutions. So yeah, that's I'm looking at this as part of a broader cultural shift towards, once we actually care and we want to own our own data and we think that's important, then we might start to look towards these blockchain-based solutions that will enable that.
Okay. So
I think throughout my operational side of things, the biggest headache is the primary market. The value of the fundamentals is not correlated with the secondary markets, right? And then we know a lot of projects. Ideally, the best case is after the product's already delivered, and then if it's a utility token, you should have used it, and then you should grow it organically. But right now, there's a lot of capital market plays, and which is not correlated with the fundamental in the projects because everyone's speculating on what is going on, what's the partnerships, what's the PR side of thing, because that's what attract more retail investors, and so that's why a lot of retail investors got hurt, especially last year. So yeah, that's why right now it's a good opportunity for more companies who's really delivering and getting more tested by whether they can create real customers and real cash flows and and then in this bearish market, there's like less traction on the like speculation side of thing. Yeah, I think that's a good timing for more like talented and really smart people who's coming in the place, because it's less of a like let's say reputation jeopardized by that, because you actually deliver. Yeah.
So as we mentioned about a little bit about the secondary market. So I want to squeeze one question which is not really related to integration, but I think is also very important, and personally I'm very curious. So I know lots of especially legit projects are pursuing to do STO now, and they're like holding their ICO or their token offering. So do you think in the future there will be a legit or more regulated ICO process like coming out from the regulator side and the government side? And do you still like personally believe in this ICO process? So I think maybe Ashley, I know you work like closely with the governments and regulators. So do you have any opinions on that?
Sure, and I'll probably pass it to you after this.
Okay.
I think I'm not an investing expert on these subjects. I've invested in ICOs. I think that as long as in the United States, people are banned from investing in them unless they're accredited, it's not going to be a democratizing, broad investment opportunity as it was in early 2017 and prior, before the regulation started cramming down on it. So maybe, are ICOs really dead? We know the activity is very low right now in favor of STOs. I'm not really sure. I can imagine it coming back depending on regulation. Yeah.
Any others?
Okay, I think the reason why many people think ICO is dead because right now the bearish market. That is why people I think the point is that people began to lose confidence in the blockchain industry. Now, since there are too many bubbles in this market, and when the market comes down, people begin to wonder, I don't know, not only ICO, but STO, people should believe in that, or otherwise there is no issue to solve it.
Okay, so despite all the challenges we have, we are going to talk about something positive. So which area, I think it's a question for everyone, so whichever area, in your opinion, will have the most potential to adopt the blockchain technology?
Yeah, I mean, on the title, we're talking about gaming, and so I actually spent a lot of time in like talking to companies in blockchain space that's actually working on gaming, and we also support a lot of like public chains. One of the some of them are here, like Ontology, Thunder. They're actually very actively looking for developers to deliver products on top of their public chain. And then we can see right now, especially the large players like in gaming space, we know Epic Games, they did the Fortnite, and they actually actively consider they filed patent for the asset trading part of it, and also companies like Ubisoft, they're creating a new concept, which is a new game that is a combination of Minecraft and No Man's Sky, and which is pretty much you have the ownership, and if you provide assets inside of that virtual world, and you can gain the cryptocurrency, and then you have the way to trade the cryptocurrency into the fiat. So I think that's the exciting part, the economy across from the virtual world and the reality world. Yeah, like Brian Armstrong, the founder of Coinbase, recently he wrote an article about like VR and blockchain, because same with Fred, another Coinbase guy, and they were all talking about the digital identity part of it. Because if you spend 10 hours per day, and your digital identity is more important than the real identity, so that if it belongs to Tencent, and then Tencent shut this game down, and you have, let's say, 50K in-game asset, and you never know. So that's more of a like the realistic is more of ownership of your own, like when the content is really good, the ownership became really important. And also also if it's open source projects, if it's really good, it have a very self-regulated, self-correlated economy, and you can actually, as a gamer, I can also contribute the code in this game. So it's very community-driven. So it's a very new idea. We can see that kind of topic into mainstream conferences in gaming, like GDC. They have like blockchain session, and all the big names, as I mentioned, like same with SCRY.INFO, which is a producer for Final Fantasy. They're also working on some like game integration as well. Yeah.
So OK have one, like, I think it's pretty strong gaming portfolio as well, called Mythicals. They are like a head of studio from World of Warcraft and Call of Duties. So I think this is a maybe tough questions. So personally, I put my money on game plus blockchain. That means the AAA game, the real gaming studios, they have the biggest potential to plus the blockchain technology to either build a gaming inside the gaming identification systems or gaming egos, like reward systems, right? Mm-hmm. So do you believe the blockchain games, like the original game we have, the Crypto Kitties, those card games, so blockchain game plus blockchain, so which do you believe? So any of you guys can share on that.
Cool, maybe, you first. Yeah.
I was going to say, well, we've seen like blockchain plus game, if that's the CryptoKitties example. That kind of came about when we had this big hype around anything related to blockchain or crypto. I think there's potential there. I think there are, if we want to trade digital assets and make a game out of it, that there's potential, sure. I think the game plus blockchain makes a lot more sense to me. If we link it to Moby, for example, it's anything where you have digital entities, it could be cars, it could be connected devices, or it could be humans controlling digital avatars or whatever, and then this infrastructure, sort of payment infrastructure underneath. That's where we'll use blockchain or something like blockchain, and it'll have its most value, I think. And I think the users won't even know most of the time they're actually using a blockchain, or they'll just use it, right?
Yeah, I think as a game, the first thing is that you should be easy to play, and it is actually, the game is to customers. The customer is very realistic. No matter whether you based on blockchain or other traditional network, the game itself should be funny. Or they love to play games, right? So right now, the blockchain games, the main point is that they are not funny at all. No one wants to play it. There are no customers or no players in it. So I think in the future, like you just said, Ubisoft created a new kind of blockchain game. I think it's very good. Also, if you don't mind, SCRY also have a good blockchain game. And you can search it. It's like virtual city, and you can trade with others. Many blockchain games like Crypto Kitties, right? So you can just buy the kitties and sell it with others. That's all. There's nothing else. So, but I think this is not a game. The game should be more funny, and more people will like to play it. Yeah.
And every new platform always have the chicken and egg issue, right? Just like previously I was working with HTC Vive, and then we introduced a lot of, so our tactic is we introduce a lot of traditional IPs like Star Wars, Star Trek, Westworld, that's like haven't announced yet. But like just Ready Player One, those title into VR, and then we can sell this sales spike. It's actually like every time release a new bundle with a gaming title, and then there's like legitimate sales going on. And that's where they're leveraging the traditional existing IP into a new platform. So we see some companies doing that, like Lucy side, they using MLB, and they bought the license, and then they end up having like 10 million in transaction in 3 weeks. So those are like real like MLB fans, and they trade the card, stuff like that. So there's absolutely ways of conquer the chicken and egg issue. Like one of it is IP. And for blockchain, I think it's interesting because it's also have the rewarding system, like the whole like token economy and the community-driven side of thing inside of it, so that the player can contribute like either real currency or your labor force into the game. So it's different than a platform like virtual reality because there's more like real world currency can contribute it into it, and then it's kind of like investment, but still you are having fun. So that's a product, that's a utility, and if you own a digital asset, and that is an asset that you got satisfaction from. So it's yeah, but I don't really like right now the whole gambling part of thing is still very speculative.
All the gambling games ranking top 3 on each ecosystems, right? So I think I know we are all like have confidence on gaming. So any other area you guys feel extremely excited about, or any like excited project you want to present or mention?
Did you have something? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's so many things. So within the mobility space, the automakers within Mobi, the consortium I mentioned, are looking at a lot of different use cases. I think in general, rather than thinking, okay, gaming, autos, maybe aviation, other industries, it's helpful to first take a step back and think, what are the set of criteria that makes DLT useful? For me, I think of 4 criteria. One is you want to take advantage of a transparency feature that DLT affords. 2, you want to take advantage of the censorship resistance features from the cryptography that it affords. 3, you want to take advantage perhaps of the technical resilience and technical fault tolerance. So if you have the data spread across multiple servers, maybe thousands around the world, it's more resilient to technical failure than if it were in 1 or 2. And 4th, if you have this convening capability to take advantage of. So if there's a lot of people, paper, and processes involved, I heard this recently at a conference and I thought it was quite good, where you want the multiple parties to convene over the same decentralized ledger and you don't want a single authority to be able to control that process, then it could be prime for DLT. So I think if you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these capabilities, then that process or that industry and that component of an industry could be very prime for DLT.
I think, yeah, great points. I think like to build on that, to give a different approach as well, I'm sort of focused at the moment, or intrigued at the moment by the prospect of individual data ownership and individual control of our data. So healthcare is an easy example. I think there's huge potential there. But unfortunately, like those kinds of applications, just because it's so obvious, because the problem is so large, it might also be one of the most difficult to implement because the existing systems are so convoluted. That kind of creates the problem. So there's that kind of sort of paradox there. But I wanted to talk about there's a sort of analogical example that came up in one of my, I was doing a workshop for Indigenous Canadian students. And we were talking about, this is what, talking about how blockchain works and applying it to social problems. And they came up with a challenge that was about 10 years ago. They set up a Truth and Reconciliation Council that tried to interview, or they went to interview Indigenous Canadians that were taken from their homes as children and put in residential schools. So they took them as kids and put them in these boarding schools against their will. And then, so in 2008, they went to kind of hear their stories, get them to tell their stories, and then to try and address the problem and see what they could do to compensate them and things like that. But those stories were then sent to a central archive. So the government now kind of controls the archive of their stories. So this institution that they didn't trust to begin with, that took them out of their homes, is now controlling their stories, right? So they thought, what if we build a blockchain-based solution that would allow them kind of access on ownership over their own story that would then, they could provide permission for others to use it or just keep it silent. So I think that sort of thing is powerful. I think to have ownership of our own data, and we can apply it in lots of different areas. That's just one example. I think that's an interesting prospect.
I think we have Mark from Oracle join us. I think you are just on time. I think this is a good question for you because we just discussed a lot of challenges and potentials in this area. So this question will be, who in your opinions will boost the integration and the development of the technology? So will be the blockchain pioneers, such as Augur, Ether, all the academic opinion leader. We have many of them here. What do you think will be the big players, such as you guys, or Facebook's, or Google's? They start to build their own blockchain department. So who do you think really will boost this movement or like development of the industry?
You know, I think it's still very early days. There is a lot of work to be done, and everybody's contributions, I think, are going to be very important. Oracle's been doing a lot of work with our enterprise customers to provide a lot of capabilities around mission-grade, kind of enterprise-grade capabilities, production-ready, on top of the open source, on top of the work that a lot of the pioneers have been doing to innovate. And we're working with a lot of startups in the space to bring their capabilities into our customer base. So there is a lot of joint effort happening. I think we have a lot of experience in building things which run forever, perform at hundreds or thousands of transactions per second, have 100% or close to 100% availability, high levels of security, and so on. So we're trying to infuse a lot of that capabilities into the open source stacks, open source projects. Oracle specifically is working with a Hyperledger Fabric project from Linux Foundation. And within the Hyperledger community, there is a lot of large-scale companies, anybody from IBM, Oracle, SAP, to many, many smaller startups. And we're trying to bring and foster that innovation across the board between the larger companies and the smaller startups, because there is so much work to be done.
So I think, Chris, your subject you study, you do research with, is like big corporations versus like blockchain startup, blockchain technologies. Do you want to share your opinions on that?
Yeah, I can say part of what I look at is perhaps online digital platforms that we see, big examples, Uber, Airbnb, Facebook, Google, things like that, that rely on a lot of input from their users. So I look at how, what are the limits of decentralization in these spaces? What parts of their business might be decentralized, and what will they hang on to? And I think to go back to your question, I guess, what happens when they bring out their blockchain-based applications? I would just say, if they only embrace some aspects of the technology, if they only embed a payment system in Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or something, but then continue to control everybody's data and profit off it, or to charge transaction fees or something like that, I think they'll struggle, because there might be a more decentralized solution that can do what they do but better and cheaper. So, yeah.
Right. So when you build your own public blockchain, how do you think when you talk with the big corporations, do you think you meet any difficulty to talk with them or compete with them, or more towards the corporate with them? So
it depends, I guess. Such as big companies like Oracle, I think they will not consider us as a competitor because they have a large platform and excellent engineers. But for the traditional companies, such as actually, I have been to Japan talk with insurance experts there, and you know that Japan is a very Japanese insurance is quite traditional. They want to have innovation in this industry, but we found that they still use the paper to store to record some information. It's very hard to imagine in China, right? So they want to have some innovation in insurance using blockchain. So we can tell them how to apply blockchain technology to the insurance, but they are hard to accept it because there are many legal issues. So how to say, different companies, when I talk with them, I face different difficulties. Yeah.
So I think the whole blockchain technology at the beginning, when it's born, is all about decentralized, right? But as the industry called more and more attentions, so do you guys notice there is a power wrestlings between the government and the central banks and the regulators, right? They want to jump into the area. They want to gain the money printing powers. So I think anyone can share any idea on that, Ashley?
So I do a lot of research on what central banks are doing with blockchain for my project at the forum. And I wouldn't quite say that they're wrestling or competing at all, really. They've been starting to research this since 2014. The Bank of England was the first to publish research that I'm aware of. And then in 2015, 2016, and then especially in 2017 and 2018, several central banks, a few dozen, have published reports and have been doing research on cryptocurrencies and DLT. So they research both privately issued cryptocurrencies like Ether and Bitcoin in order to be aware of them, because part of their mandate is financial sector oversight. So they want to know what their banks might be dealing with and working with in the future in terms of well, the banks applying maybe a permissioned blockchain or something like this. But related to the cryptocurrencies that I mentioned, they want to be aware of what their consumers might be investing in and what these trends are in general. So they're researching for awareness, and they're researching so that their future systems are compatible with private sector financial systems in the future that might operate with DLT as well. So the Bank of England has a domestic interbank settlement system that they're called real-time gross settlement systems. It's investigating for its next generation system available in about 3 to 5 years, perhaps, to be compatible with DLT, even though it won't necessarily be DLT. And then on the other hand, they're investigating deliberate use of DLT for various use cases, the most common one being issuing a central bank digital currency, which could be for retail, consumer peer-to-peer payments, where we basically have an account in the central bank. The advantage being that has less default risk than holding an account at a commercial bank. It's not, I don't personally find this a very valuable use case. Or at the wholesale level, so they can issue a central bank digital currency for domestic or international interbank settlements and payments. And again, you have to think, and they are investigating whether the benefits of DLT are positive and real relative to the downsides and risks, which are very real, such as cybersecurity risk. And in many cases, their domestic systems are already quite efficient. So many central banks conclude that right now DLT is more of a distraction. So they're very active in researching, and they're not threatened by Bitcoin, or they're not competitive. They're actually just very analytical and rigorously researching economists who take a very deliberate approach to understanding these technologies.
Okay, so I think we still have 4 minutes. So even though we want to sit there and talk with you guys forever, but I think we need to wrap it up. So I think everyone have just half minute to 1 minute to share. What's your opinion with the further integration of the blockchain technology that will shape or form the current financial or political or business environment? So what's your insight of like short-term or long-term for blockchain? Just what do you believe?
From
start
the
from-
other side? Me?
Start from
me?
yeah.
Okay. So I guess in future, we think blockchain should be more focused on the traditional industry. If blockchain will not, how to say, I think in future, more people and more industry should use the technology. That makes sense, not only in the financial institutions, not only in the gaming industry, also other industry should also use this technology to keep blockchain a step further.
Yeah, on the, like, we know when Satoshi first wrote the white paper is because of the economic crisis. So open finance definitely a very important vertical that like wealth redistribution, power redistribution, fairness, and that will be continuously be the topic. And then we see some great integration in enterprise as well, but it's been quiet because they don't need the attention from retail. They don't need attention from like public relation. But we will see more and more, and we know like especially in China, like Baidu, Tencent, Alibaba, they're already having different verticals that on the blockchain as a service level that's working on medical, on digital identity, stuff like that. So more and more use cases are gonna come up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to think of the emergence process, I think we often draw too strict a line between, some networks emerge and they get criticized for being too centralized or applications being too centralized. I think we're seeing a process of emergence where a centralized solution will crop up to enable further decentralization, if that makes sense. Like an exchange is kind of a centralized solution to enabling the decentralization of funding companies or funding networks. So I think we'll continue to see this as a process, and then progressively more decentralized solutions come from those initially centralized solutions. So I think it's we're going to see, we need to be a bit more lenient on these in the early days, and then figure out how we can decentralize further later on.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how enterprise and incumbent organizations make decisions and conclusions related to DLT in the next couple of years. So on the central bank side, I think on the automaker side and many other sides, a lot of research is happening now, and they'll reach conclusions in the next perhaps 2 years about whether DLT provides efficiency gains, as people are excited about, or whether it's a distraction. So I'm excited about that. And then secondly, I'm excited about, and I would like the cryptocurrency community to engage more with professional academics and researchers and PhDs and others to draw from their expertise and analytical orientation, which I think is often missing in the cryptocurrency community, unless it's within the kind of engineering perspective. But when we're talking about economic issues or sociological issues or thinking about how the future can be, there's a lot of experts within institutions and universities that can be referenced and brought into the conversation. And I'm looking forward to continued dialogue there.
I'm really excited about what's happening in the industries outside of financial services. Clearly, there is a lot in banking and such, but from an Oracle perspective, we're seeing a number of customers, a lot of projects in 2018 have just started taking advantage of the enterprise blockchain capabilities in the permission blockchain world. And actually, we started seeing in the last quarter of last year and going into this year, production customers in supply chain, distribution chains, conflict minerals tracing, food provenance, a number of customers who are running production-grade business networks in a permission blockchain environment with their ecosystems across the supply chains, distribution, trading, maritime shipping. There was just a very large maritime shipping network announced in November in China at the Global Import Forum called Global Shipping Business Network, which includes 5 of the largest container shipping companies in the world, 4 of the 5 largest ports and terminal operators. So we're seeing a lot of applications that are beyond the basic payments or cryptocurrency financial services type things across many industries, and many of them are beginning to take hold from a production live deployment.
Okay, so honored to have all of you guys here, and thank you for all the audience, and thank you for the SCRY Insight to put together this TAMIC conference during this bear market, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.